I'm Nisi, Shawl, and I'm talking with you about dialogue and dialect. Dialogue is idealized and compressed speech. Ever try writing what you hear? As an exercise, I recommend going somewhere public and transcribing an overheard conversation, an activity my friend Talissa calls ear hustling, meaning she's hustling information no one intended to give her. The exchanges you overhear are almost always much less coherent than the dialogue you find in books. Verbal tics such as, are minimized. Gestures and tone are used much less frequently as phrase or sentence completers. Here's my definition. Dialogue is an edited version of speech between two or more characters written to give a reader the impression that it's natural. Often, authors are instructed to show, not tell, the stories they write. In my opinion, you must do both, especially when you are introducing your readers to an unfamiliar world, as we speculative fiction authors do. Dialogue can both show and tell. Using dialogue to tell people about your world can bore them when it's nothing more than the recitation of an infodump. That's basically an indigestible lump of exposition. It can last a couple of paragraphs or a couple of pages. It interrupts the action and sometimes stops readers from finishing your story. If your alien mouths off about the 11 exploratory missions she has served on and who sponsored them and how they evaded Earth's detection, that's an invitation for readers to skim over that part of your work. Even worse is when two aliens are talking about something they should both know without saying it. This is sometimes referred to among SF writers as an "as you know, Bob," because it often goes like this. As you know, Botili, on our planet the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. It's ridiculous sounding. The sole reason for that line is to convey information to the reader, and that is way too obvious. There are a couple of ways you can use dialogue to tell that aren't so obvious. You can make one of the characters talking more knowledgeable than the others. Make them teacher and students, boss and employees, guide and tourists, or something along those lines. You can have them disagree about the facts you're sharing in their dialogue or about the meaning of those facts. Showing your world via dialogue is a really cool means of world building. I recommend reading Terry Bisson's short story, They're Made of Meat, for an example of how this can be done. It's really an excellent example. That story is written entirely in dialogue, but at its end, we know who is talking, what they're talking about, and a lot more. It is widely available on the internet. Just Google it. But my advice is to avoid the movie version and go for the text version the first time you look for it. Dialogue can tell and dialogue can show. Dialogue can show setting, character, and action. If one of your characters says to another, "Watch out for the tendrils hanging off those jelly trees, they sting," then you know that one is familiar with the jelly trees, one is not, and they are in the vicinity of something called jelly trees, things which sting. Probably they're moving around near these jelly trees, and you have at least a vague idea of what jelly trees look like. They have dangling tendrils. Setting, character, action. You can reveal even more about characters with the choices you make about how they speak. You can show their ethnicity, class, country of origin, gender, ability, and a host of other traits simply by the topics they choose to discuss, what they find difficult to talk about, what they focus on, as for instance, colors, brands, cost, and how they talk. Slang, big words, questions. Incomplete sentences, words and phrases in a different language. Here's another exercise you can do to sharpen your skill at writing dialogue. Take a simple sentence and manipulate one or two words in it to highlight different character traits. The one I usually ask for revisions on is, I got in my car and drove to my apartment. A very simple sentence. I got in my car and drove to my apartment. So the exercise would be to try substituting different words for car, such as hybrid. I got in my hybrid and drove to my apartment. 69 Mustang. I got in my 69 Mustang and drove to my apartment. Or time machine. I got in my time machine and drove to my apartment. You can do that. You can do the same with apartment and with drove. I got in my car and drove to my flat. I got in my car and drove to my beach house. Notice what making these substitutions does to your idea of the character speaking the sentence. Speculative fiction authors often invent new words for the new concepts we cover in our stories. Many Philip K. Dick characters live in Connex. Many SF skyscrapers were constructed of plasteel, and so on. Depending on the clues you drop with the structure of your neologism, a fancy way of saying new word, you may not need to do more than have your characters use it in dialogue, in context. And that's pretty much all I want to say about dialogue. Now, dialect. Dialect is a special sort of dialogue, and its representation is especially problematic in certain ways. For one thing, some editors dislike dialect, and some publications ban it through their submission guidelines. My story, Water Museum, for instance, was rejected by an editor who claimed that intelligent people don't speak in dialect, so my white protagonist, who used various ruralisms, should not have been able to conceptualize certain complex ideas. And her vocabulary was far too large, according to this man. Also, if you depict only certain speech patterns phonetically, you're privileging all the rest. You're exoticizing the phoneticized speech patterns and implying that those not phoneticized are the default, the norm. Phoneticization, which I also call I-dialect, may distract the reader from your story too, because puzzling out phonetic renditions of speech can be work. Many people recommend limiting I-dialect to a word or two, or a line or paragraph at the beginning of a section meant to represent non-standard speech. But I have read whole novels written in I-dialect that I loved. My favorite is Ridley Walker by Russell Hoban. Ridley Walker is set in a post-apocalyptic southern England, and the text is semi-phoneticized. It's an imaginary future dialect that tells so much about how the world got into the mess the author depicts. It's also rhythmic and beautiful, and once I got into it, I didn't want to get out. On the other hand, in the short story Belief, the use of phoneticization is restricted to the speeches of one character. The narration and all other characters are rendered in standard spelling and punctuation. I hate that story. Yeah, I'll try to get a sample page posted from it, and maybe you'll understand a little bit of why I hate it just by looking at that sample. Basically, it's a lot of work for me to understand what's being said by this character that's phoneticized. And because he's the only one that's subject to this treatment, he appears outlandish, weird, strange. He's an other with a capital O. The bulk of my experience with dialects is in English, though I do realize that they exist in other languages. I know of dialects in French and Spanish, for example. I think these issues apply to them as well, and to the invented dialects of speculative fiction. I have compiled a list of techniques that I think work well as a relief from phoneticization when it comes to depicting non-standard speech patterns. There's word omission and word order. I deal with this a bit in my short story, Black Betty.